did it force them to cooperate? Was it sort of suggested that she should be the Secretary of State?
Well, it was sort of suggested, and she stepped down. She's been with those people a long time. Remember, Hillary knows how the game works. Now, remember, Obama is a community activist in Hyde Park. I mean, this stage is way beyond him. Mm-hmm. Hillary had been in the game way before him, because Hillary and her husband was in the Contra down there in Arkansas, with selling drugs and down there in Nicaragua. That's back in the '80s, so they were been around. So I mean, they know the deal. They've been around 20 years. So and they know how it works. So when she knew that they told her to stand down, she understands how the game works.
A man who I know how he looks, who I've seen around the president, is a big new Brzezinski.
Right.
He formed a group called the Trilateral Commission.
That's right, the Trilateral Commission, exactly.
What was the purpose of that?
The Trilateral Commission was basically what they intended to do was to take the three major regions of the earth and set up three major regions. You don't get the United States here and say North and South America. Unify that. They wanted to unify Europe and then unify Asia, and then bring all three of them together to form a world government, which would transcend the elected officials or sovereign nations like the United States. You'd have another level above them, and it would abolish all national governments. You'd have a world Congress like the UN that would govern and give edicts, and a world army, a world religion, etc. So that was their goal. To abolish all borders, so you'd only have you'd have a Congress like the UN instead of the Congress here. You'd have a great Congress.
Yes, sir.
A body that basically that would control the whole world, and even the powers behind the scene.
Okay.
Well, I asked that question for a reason, because during that time, Charles de Gaulle, who was the head of France,
right,
they were opposed to Charles de Gaulle because Charles de Gaulle was trying to become a thermonuclear component alone, without their help.
Exactly.
And it was because they were interested in doing what you said, setting up a supernatural, government.
Right.
That ultimately here in this country, when they set up what I call, that's why I brought this book, called The Fourth Reich.
Right.
By Jim Marrs.
Jim Marrs, exactly.
Okay.
And it's an excellent book.
At the library.
You should go to the library and make sure you check it out and read it, because Jim Marrs shows how this whole system here in America is only to continue what they had Hitler doing. Now, Hitler wasn't doing anything.
Right.
There were other people who had him doing things, and all of those people are in that book, listed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you know what? I want to move to Iran. And I want to ask you, the Shah of Iran, once he was a friend of the United States of America. Why was he such a friend? How did the United States of America benefit by having him in power? And why was his people opposed to him?
Well, you have to go back to, here's a book. It's called Diplomacy by Deception. It's by Dr. John Coleman. He was an ex-British intelligence agent.
Library. Okay.
Now, what he goes through, it's a nice book to give you an overview of what happened in the Middle East. And what he talks about there is when we have to go all the way back to early 1900. This is when they began to discover oil in the Middle East.
Okay.
Slavery was going out. Slavery was dying out really in about the 1830s. And they had abolished it in Europe for 30 or 40 years before it came. Before they even came to America. That was out because they knew the Industrial Revolution was going to come in, and slavery was not would not be profitable to feed somebody. Well, they got machines now. So what happened? And then in the early 1900s, they discovered oil in the Middle East, and the British was in there, and they began to undermine and play the various sects, like the various versions of the Islamic, the two versions of Islamic,
Sunni and Shiite.
Sunnis and Shiites. They played them against one another. That's the reason why eventually the House of Saudi has the what's the temple there? I mean, they're there
Mecca.
and then Mecca.
Yeah.
Well, they reshaped that whole. We don't have time. Just say it this way: the British and Americans reshaped that whole region and make one thing happen. There was a guy called Moshe Diki. In 1950, he wanted to oppose the European powers that come in and divide and start taking oil. And what he decided to do is nationalize everything. And what happened? Eisenhower and Churchill. They said, listen, you know, they told him, they said, listen. And what they did there is they boycotted the oil.
Okay.
The country went into bankruptcy almost. And then the Shah came in after that. I'm speeding it up. He was overthrown, driven out. Then Shah came in, and then he reigned for a period of time. But he had this glorious idea of that he was going to restore the Persian Empire. Back into the days of the Xerxes, before before he was defeated by Alexander the Great. He was going to extend it all the way around to Egypt. You know, the vast empires. Wait a minute. And he got military help. He also decided to do, remember, he decided to do the nuclear power.
Okay.
Before we have today. And that was another thing. They told him that was a no-no. They did not want him to rebuild Israel, Iran.
Yes.
And he had the same problem with Saddam. They wanted to rebuild these nations.
Okay.
And they didn't realize that they were subject unto another power, and that was the British and the American Empire. They was not going to have it. They were basically the only way of existing was to supply oil to America, and at cheap prices.
Yes.
But they decided that the people were not getting the benefit of this colonial power.
Yes.
So they revolted. They were overthrown, and then they put somebody in, and somebody rose up like the Shah. He was overthrown.
Yes.
And they brought in the radical form of Islamic.
You're talking about the Ayatollah Khomeini.
They brought him in. And then through various things, and then he passed away, and then this whole thing, and they get ready to overthrow this. So they done this 3 or 4 times.
So anyone that wants to nationalize the oil,
anybody that plays with that oil is playing with dynamite. You don't play with that oil. Oil is, besides the oil and banking, are 2 most powerful forces or industries in this country. They determine foreign policy and everything.
Yes.
And when you say oil, you're talking about Rockefeller. When you talk about banking, you're talking about Rockefeller.
And Rothschild.
And the Rothschilds.
I look at them from the perspective, and I want to get your opinion. They're Luciferian.
Oh yeah, they're definitely Luciferian. There's no question about it.
And when I say Luciferian,
this colonial power,
yes.
so they revolt.